Okay, welcome everybody. We are live currently. I'm just watching the attendees come in one by one, so I'm going to give everybody a few seconds to get logged in as those numbers ramp up. Thank you everybody for joining us from wherever you are in the world. I'm dialing in at 6 in the evening here from Melbourne, Australia, and I know Mattias and Johannes are both in Sweden at the moment. So it looks like we've got a good number in, so we will get started. Our discussion today is around the idea of production efficiency, and actually the connection for me, which is really interesting, is between performance in the factory and performance of the business. And I think we've got a really interesting panel to discuss that today. Before we get started, just quick housekeeping things. If you have questions, just click on the Q&A window and add those in there, and we'll get to those when we get to the panel discussion towards the end of the session. My name is Philip Stoten. I am a writer and journalist. I spent the first half of my career in the electronic manufacturing space, initially as a PCB designer and later in various different production roles before switching after about 15 years to journalism. Some of the people I worked with as a PCB designer said it was because I wasn't good enough as a designer, but actually it was an interest in journalism and what was going on in the industry generally. And I've been watching and covering the PCB industry for more than 20 years now as a writer. I write for Forbes and various other publications within the industry. What I think we've got going on at the moment is the interesting situation. You know, there's no denying that this year has been a particularly interesting and particularly challenging year for the EMS industry, and people have responded in various different ways. The pandemic has really shone a spotlight on every frailty in the industry, every frailty in supply chain, and it's made both manufacturing and supply chain big news. You're seeing a lot of coverage as to what's going on in this very challenging and very difficult time. Some EMS companies have been more successful than others in navigating the choppy waters of 2020. There's no doubt that it's not clear how far we are through that process. We've had this very strange perfect storm of supply chain challenges, demand challenges, working practice challenges. So it's been very, very difficult time. Most agree that those with a greater grip on their processes, thanks to digital transformation, have fared better than others. And I think key to being able to manage any kind of disruption is having visibility. So that's real-time data that's made companies more agile and more resilient. And agility and resilience are two of the key words that I'm hearing when I'm talking to CEOs of EMS companies, but also to OEMs when they're looking to the future of their supply chain. And I guess the third element of that is being responsive, being able to be very responsive to their customers very, very quickly as they have to respond to changes in their markets. This may well be the worst crisis we've ever seen, and I think that's certainly true for many people working in supply chain and manufacturing, but it certainly wasn't the first. We had, Fukushima, we had Thai floods, we've had various different disruptions. We had the global financial crisis in 2008. We had the tech wreck of the 1999, 2000, 2001 timeframe. And there's no doubt there'll be other challenges further down the line. What we have to remember is we have to be ready for the next crisis, and we have no idea what it is. So it's not a question of what did we do this time? How do we get ready to do exactly the same next time? It's a question of what do we do next time, but in a completely different situation. So some interesting challenges. One of the really interesting examples that I'm excited to be talking about today, and we're able to talk about it today because we have the CEO of NOTE on, Johannes Lind-Widestam. is Note. They've really performed incredibly in the last 6 months during particularly challenging times. Sales increases of 16%, operating profit up by 31%, operating margin growing by nearly 1% to 7.7%, growth in net profit, growth in after-tax profit. And what I think is interesting when I look at what Johannes has done is in the 2 years or so that he's been in charge, a 3x growth in the stock price of the company, which is phenomenal. So I'm really excited to explore with him the connection between the business performance and the efficiency that he's driven in the factory, because I know it's been a mission of Johannes over the last 2 years to really improve the way the factories perform, and I'm really fascinated to see how that's impacted on the way the company forms. So I'm going to introduce you to Johannes Lind-Widestam. Hopefully I pronounced that right this time, Johannes. And if I could ask you just to give me a little bit of your background and a quick introduction to Note in terms of the scale of the business and the footprint you have.
And you're getting closer and closer, Philip, to pronounce it right. Soon you have it there. Okay, my name is Johannes Lind-Widestam. I am the CEO of Note. I took over this position in late September 2018. At that time, I was part of the board for Note. And my background is that I have been, through the last, say, 20 plus years, I've worked in different production companies. I've had 4 years at Flextronics in the earlier phase of the EMS industry, 1999 to 2003. I've also worked 3 years at Kitron, who is one of our colleagues in the Nordic region. They're also having a very strong first half of this year, so they are also doing a very good job. Between that, I've also worked for product owners like Assa Abloy, the world leading lock company, Nobel Biocare, the largest dental implant company at that time. And my background is in business administration or my education. So I'm not an engineer, even though I try to, cheat and pretending to know something about drawings and production technologies and stuff like that. Currently 48 years and are enjoying my task here at Note a lot.
Okay, and give me an idea of the scale of Note and the footprint you have and the size of the business.
Yes, if we look at the 2019 numbers, we were at 1.76 billion Swedish, corresponds to roughly 170 million euro. We have 8 production facilities, 3 in Sweden, 2 in UK, 1 in Finland, 1 in Estonia, and 1 in China. We are around 1,100 employees currently, and we are, as I said before, we were at 2019, we were doing just over 7% in operating profit. And we were up that last year as well with a few percent or 0.4 or 0.5%.
Okay, so let's explore a little bit around the connection between business performance and factory performance. How do you see that connection? How critical do you see that? Is it a happy coincidence that the business has done better whilst the factories have done better, or is one driving the other?
I'm not the kind of guy that believes in pure luck as a success factor. So I would say that it has something to do with the activities that we do. But we can see, we have to divide it in different steps. As a CEO and as a management team, we are looking at the very, generic KPIs. We are very keen on looking at the relation between growth and employee increase. I believe that there is no direct link between sales growth and growing in number of employees. If we grow, we have to figure out how do we produce smarter, because if we only add people, we will not add margin. So it's very, very important to keep track of your headcount number compared to your sales number or your value add part of your sales numbers. And that's one of our KPIs internally that we pay attention of. I'm also a firm believer of something that we call fall through. If we add another 100 million Swedish in sales, we should have a positive effect on our bottom line, not only with the same margin, but we are expecting that in our industry, we should be around 15% in the high cost regions and around 12% in the low cost regions. That's how we see upon it. Some sites has greater opportunity than that, but in general terms, that's what we see. So those two are two of our KPIs that we follow very closely. One third that we look at very closely is how do we utilize our factory space. When I joined NOTE, we saw that we were getting quite full in our factories. And I traveled around and I saw that there is a great potential to reduce the footprint that we use in the factories and therefore increase the level of sales that we can push through the sites. So that has been one of our challenges. We saw that both our Chinese and our Estonian factory were very full at that moment. Today we are turning more through the sites, but we also have quite good free space, and we believe that we can add another 50% of sales in basically all our sites today compared to 2009 numbers. And when we are there, I expect that we can grow even further, but that's the aim that we have today. So those three are the main KPIs that we are looking from a management point of view, and then we drag it or we pull it down, and then when we add projects, we are much more detailed in how we measure numbers and what the kind of activities that we do at those times.
Yeah. So how much of that system was in place when you joined, and how much did you have to drive as change when you arrived as a new leader? Was it a big shake-up for NOTE?
I think the biggest change that we did was that before I joined, we were very, how shall I say, hierarchically driven. We had the head office was much in charge and saying, okay, this is what you should do and this is how you should do it. And I know that the head office is quite small, and it's actually smaller today than it was when I joined. And we are trying to educate the sites. We're working with the sites, and we know that the change will not happen just because the head office is telling them to change. It has to be driven by the people in the sites. Otherwise, how should I say, the success is going to be very low. So we needed to get the sites on board, and we needed the sites to be in charge of the projects. And so they needed to feel that we are supporting them rather than telling them what to do. And that has been, I would say, the biggest change in how we drive these projects in NOTE. Yeah.
And before we get on to, and we'll bring in Mattias in a short while and kind of talk about the way things are done, but talk me through some of the examples of projects you've done and what incremental change, incremental improvement that's made in the business.
We can take our Chinese facility as an example. I think that's probably the best example we have. We have done two major projects, but both are in our low-cost regions, Estonia and China. And what we said when we started these projects is that we should not see our low-cost labor sites as a low-cost labor production facility. We need to see them with the same eyes as we look at a Swedish or a Finnish site, because the costs are creeping up to levels that are getting higher and higher, and sooner rather than later, they will have to start work with automation and efficiencies. So we said that we are taking the approach that these sites should look very similar to how we look at the sites in our high-cost regions. And that had not been the case. If we had problems, we simply added people, and now we have to take away that kind of approach. And we were adding people based on the sales increase, not compared to what the work really required. But if we take China, for example, we had a very strong local management saying that they should have this and they should have that amount of people. And we started with, before we kicked this off, we realized that we needed another set of managements. We changed our MD, and we had a big discussion about how to run this project. And what happened was that the people underneath the managing director were having a lot of good ideas. We brought Mattias from MTEK with us, and we started to look at what do we believe we can do. And the factory was completely full. They were not able to get any more customers in, basically, and we had a problem to get the products out. So we said that, okay, we need to be more efficient in how we work with our SMD lines. We need to be more efficient in the secondary operations, like the selective soldering and the wave soldering, especially the wave soldering. And we needed to be much more efficient in how we utilize workstations for the box build and the secondary operations. And what we saw was that we had two new and modern lines in SMD, and we had two old lines. And quite early in the process, I was challenging the team and saying that, okay, if you can get your setup times reduced with 50%, you can throw out the two old lines, and then you free up that space, and you will free up your best operators, because they were running the old line because they were more complex to run. And everyone's saying, oh, that's not impossible. So I think 3 months later, we had half the setup times, and we had increased the uptime in the new SMD lines, and we could sell the two old lines. And today we are running the SMD with roughly 30% higher capacity with two lines less. And I think we can do even better with only these two lines.
Yeah.
So we still have room to grow there. And what we also did was that we looked through how we were assembling products after the boards were ready. And we have taken out more than half of all our assembly tables. And that has enabled us to clean out 1 out of 3 floors, basically completely. So we have that area for expansion. So we can more or less double the site in China in output without adding more and more space. And we have in the same process reduced the direct labor force with roughly 40 heads.
Wow.
We are having about the same value add as we had before.
Yeah. I think that's, I think what's phenomenal there is you take something that locals or the local management perceived as being running at capacity and feeling that the only way you could take more business was to throw more people at it, and then you turn that on its head and you kind of change that process, and suddenly you've got the ability to grow there, and you're actually using a smaller number of lines, and you're using them more efficiently. Can I bring you in here, Mattias? Because I'd just like to get your view on that. Johannes mentioned that you were involved in that. Tell me a little bit about how you saw that and how that China facility was able to become so much more efficient, and how it fundamentally changed.
I think it's been a really, really interesting journey. And one of the first of all, the team that from the headquarters is driving the improvements together under the helm of Johannes is amazing, as well as the team in the Chinese facility is allowing them to be fact-based on their improvements, to be able to challenge, as Johannes mentioned, if we can lower the changeover times, so we can reduce the lead times, if we can reduce the space needed. And this has sparked a culture of continuous improvement, avalanche style. So they are continuously making improvements completely fact-based. So it's really cool to see the engagement level increasing, the employee satisfaction increasing, the quality increase, which is dramatic, it was good before, but now even having those focus areas and then the way that they are driving is really impressive to see. And there's also
and I think it's really interesting that you had all that pent up ideas and momentum, Johannes, from the middle management team, or the even at an operator level. It's really important to get those people on board and get them involved in the projects. One of the things I was really interested in, and we talked about a little bit before, is this idea of creating almost best in class at the different facilities, but creating some healthy competition between facilities. How do you create that? How do you keep it healthy, and how do you incentivize it, or is there just a natural desire to win amongst these different groups of people?
I think that we are quite, we don't have so much prestige internally, so there's no one that really tries to sit on the knowledge. We are all the sites are quite different. They come from different areas. Many have been acquired, and there is different cultures that has came into our group, the same as more or less any other EMS company that is out there. But we have managed to get them to be supportive towards each other's. But I would also say that the strong growth that we are having is enabling all that, because if you are working with flat sales numbers, everyone will become much more protective with their own sales. They will have a shrinking top line. So I think that our overall performance is helping our ability to help each other, so to say. But I would also say that we have been really keen on ensuring that our delivery performance and our quality performance are best in class, because that's what I always use as our main sales tool. Why should a customer work with us? And I often tell them to, okay, talk to some other of our customers. They can tell you how our performance are. We take much pride in that we should hit our quality and deliver performance numbers, and we try to exceed the expectations that the customers have. So we are not that concerned if our inventory is a little higher than the industry standard. We are working with maybe 4 to 5 turns per year in our inventory turns, and I think that's one way of enabling us to carry some inventory for flexibility. We would not mind to have it above that number, but we're not pushing it. So we're trying nice setups that have put the customer in focus instead of putting our KPIs in focus, and that has enabled us to earn credibility and show the flexibility that our customers need. And then on top of that, we have this high growth. It makes life very simple when we have those KPIs in place, and also add sales, because the production we have good control over it. We measure it monthly, and we have top management involvement in all the operating discussions that we have. I try to make myself involved in how we set up the sites more or less from start. And I also would like to add that when we put the space utilization at the top, I think it's important that we can always show that we have free space. Because if you're a customer and you visit a potential EMS supplier and it's completely full, you always think about where should my production be? Will that be in the basement or on the attic? So you have to have at least this free space to show that here is where we can put your production. We don't know yet, but this is an area that is open for you. So that has also been a very important task for me, to ensure that we always have free space to show customers that we can grow.
I think what's interesting there is the way you talk about the KPIs, because you mention inventory turns, and I know prior to the current crisis, inventory was kind of a big deal, but we're wondering whether just in time is a strategy that isn't very good for just in case at the moment. But I think the other thing that's key there is there has to be a dividend for the customer. It can't just be better performance in the factory and better performance for the business. It needs to be better for the customer as well. So they need to be getting on-time delivery. They need to be getting the quality they want. They need to be getting an efficient business that is therefore more competitive. Before we go on to a bit more detail, you've also had some substantial projects in the Estonia facility. What kind of improvements have you made there, and what impact has that had?
In Estonia, we have our factory in 2 different buildings, and when I started, we had our warehouse in one building and the production in the other building. And to ship goods, even if it's only like 50 meters across an open area, and you talk about electronic components, we spent a lot of time to seal the boxes when we ship them over to avoid any humid or rain or anything to enter the product. So we spent quite a lot of time when it came to warehouse management, and we had a lot of people working with warehouse. So what we did was that we invested in 4 Cardex towers, 2 for the SMT components and 2 for the through-hole components. And we managed to squeeze that into our main production building. And at the same time, we did an efficiency project also for the setup. So now when we pick the goods, we rig the feeders directly. So we have avoided one step, and we have managed to get maybe 10 people out from the warehouse. And since we have been growing, we have not laid them off. We have retrained them into doing other things. So we have been adding quite a lot of efficiencies. And we also see that this is following our fall through idea. So we have had the expected fall through for the Estonia factory after the implementation of this project.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, does growth help? Clearly it does. You know, being able to do this when the business is growing is much easier than it would be if the if the top line was flat, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to have the people's dedication into this, if you are a change manager, say in Estonia, and you know you have a flat top line, and any efficiencies that you drive out is going to mean that your colleagues are getting laid off. That's not a very healthy environment. So it's much easier to do it if you have, like we have had in Estonia, around 20% growth for the last year. Then it's much easier to absorb the people that you free up. So it's much easier. So that's of course. That's a given, as I see.
Yeah, and creating extra capacity allows you to do that. I want to bring Mattias in now. Mattias, can we start with and I know you've already spoken, but can we start with a quick introduction? You're founder and CEO of MTEK. Give me a little 2-minute introduction for your own background.
Sure, yeah. Founder, CEO of MTEK, been in the business for 25 years. I was working for Nokia some 25 years ago, was part of the data management team. We did the first neural networks and the first closed loop machine learning. Been part of acquiring a lot of equipment and SMT equipment specifically. Been helping companies all over the world for the last 20 years. And we are now, what we're doing is that we're having a systemized approach. So bringing everything into software. So now we're a software company with a mission to make manufacturing simple. So.
Yeah, and that's really where I wanted to start, Mattias, because when I look at the success that Node have had and the processes they've gone through, how do you avoid just going and doing this bit, going and doing this bit, going and doing this bit? How do you create a holistic solution, a system for the business that continually improves and continually drives better efficiency and hence better performance?
Our approach has always been to connect man, method, machine, and material. And in this case, to make sure that improvements are fact-based. Things that you can go in and start seeing directly, that such as space improvements, such as lead time improvements, such as changeover optimizations, such as efficiency in SMT machines. Things are fairly simple to see, but they always have to be backed up by data. Without data, you'll be blind. One of the first things that we do is when we go in and help clients to systemize the improvements is to understand what data points can we collect, where do we collect them, and actually how do we correlate them. So as you know, Phil, we now during the spring we launched MCell, adaptive automation solution specifically for through-hole assembly, and right now we're bringing out of the shadows MBrain, which is basically the system that I always wanted to have. That brings value, that can connect to any type of machine, and actually is very simple, can allow operators, engineers, management to share the same view on improvements, to see data collection points of not just a siloed approach, but basically any equipment on the factory floor, and to create really valuable insights, not just data, not just dashboards, but actually the root cause analysis. Why do we have a variation? Just had a discussion this morning regarding capability and how to understand variation and where the root cause of that variation comes from, and put that into a context in order to actually make a sustainable improvement. The risk is otherwise that you initiate a project and it is as it is, just a project. It's not a long-term improvement philosophy, and improvement has to be data-based. So that's our.
And yet, Johannes, when you look at that, do you think that what you've developed is a kind of a systemized approach to changing things rather than just going in and fixing one problem and then fixing the next? Do you feel there's now a holistic system that means this is an ongoing process?
I would say that we are getting there. We are not there. We are still in the earlier phases of our journey, if you put it like that. But we be systematic, and we try to set a start date or a start scenario, and then we see what kind of improvements do we do and how do we work through this. When we take China, for example, China was a lot of the data was handled manually. So people were walking around with a piece of paper and a pen, and they were doing a lot of things. And that was one of the first things that we said, this is not okay. We need to go to the next level. So now we work with the same setup as we do in the rest of the world with hand scanners and everything. So we have started to be much better in collecting data. China was good in collecting data, but it was a manual system. So it was quite easy to automate that and start to so to say, take out the first easy wins, if you put it like that. And we are getting better and better in understanding the data and how do we get the data out. And we have been quite firm in understanding how all the sites are reporting. We have monthly meetings where I attend, where we go through all the operational data, starting with deliveries, quality, production, sales, and maybe 10 KPIs each. And we don't go through each and every one of them in detail, but we see, okay, are we following the plan or are we not following the plan?
Yeah. And are those KPIs available cross-site? So Estonia can see what China are doing and China can see what Sweden are doing in terms of the same KPIs, or do they have unique ones?
Yes. And we also discuss it openly and say, okay, why do we have this kind of performance in China while we have a completely different performance in Estonia and Sweden? So we can share, we share and we discuss and we connect people so we can start to learn from each other. And when we did the Estonia projects, we had 2 people from our Norrtälje site in Sweden joining for the initial project meetings for them to feedback how they were doing it in Norrtälje and also bring back the things that Estonia was doing better. So it was a good cross-learning. And we have had Estonians going to all 3 Swedish sites to learn how they are operating, to understand more, especially from the material side that was in focus for our Estonia improvement.
Yeah, and is that a question of making sure that you're not just delivering the right data to the right people so they can make the right decision, but also empowering people and distributing that leadership so people can make decisions in their own area to drive the right results?
Yeah, for me, it's important that data has to be known, it has to be reliable, and it has to be used in a local way. I think that many companies have too high expectations in that the central team can do a lot of things, but the central teams can only enable the local teams to do the work. If we try to do it differently, it will never succeed. I've tried to do that approach before, and it's very rarely that it works because then you decide to be some kind of, they're just receivers. They don't contribute, and that will never create the foundation of a learning organization. So I'm very keen on having the work done locally. The central teams can only enable and guide and support and also push if needed, but they cannot do the work themselves because they're not actively working in the sites. And I think many companies that I've seen are putting too much faith in how much the central team can actually do. They are the enablers and often creators of a lot of good ideas, but the work so the decided solution has to be how shall I say, received well, it has to be also including the people that are going to use it, because they are the ones that have to live with the consequences of it. So I'm very focused on having the sites to be the drivers. Then, of course, I'm always the sponsor of all the projects that we do, but that's only to ensure they know that it's important, and that enables the teams to be much stronger in the process work or the project works.
Yeah, so they can see a top down commitment in there. Matthias, when you look at that, and you look at that within Note, but also with other businesses, how do you train and enable those change agents to be able to work in that style of management? How do you make sure they're ready to take responsibility for those changes?
I think what Johannes pointed out, which I really like, and it's very clear in his leadership style, is making sure people are connected. Machines, method, material, everything is connected, but man has to be connected. So enabling and empowering people on the local sites to actually be able to take decisions, of course, bringing forth the improvement proposals, making sure that they are driven in the right way, and it's essential. At the end of the day, we're all humans, we're all people, and we make improvements, and everyone brings value. Everyone comes to work being creative one way or another. And if we can then back that up by data, back it up by actually seeing things that they haven't seen before in a different way, data driven, I think that is when changes becomes sustainable, because that actually data enables a culture of improvements. Because when you actually see that you're able to do these changes, and it's, as Johannes says, it's empowered on a local basis, that the local sites, when they make improvements, they of course, the pride of improvements is also there. So it's, and they know that data is available for everyone to see. They know that they can showcase and share. And so I think it is extremely important to engage people in it.
Yeah, and to get them committed. What I wonder about when you have that huge amount of data, not just from your facility, from other facilities, you have data from all these different points. How do you protect the various different people from that huge complexity? Because if I'm operating a certain part of the line, I need data, and I need dashboards for myself. I maybe need the ability to drill down, but if you just give me everything in a huge database or spreadsheet, it's very confusing. Protecting people from complexity, I think, is going to become more important.
Yeah, it's like when I drive my car, I have no interest to look at the stock prices. I want to look at the dashboard, look at the road first of all, and then drive my car. So I need to have the right information in front of me at the point of use, of course. And then I want to see, when I arrive home, I want to see how the stock prices has gone. I think those things is also extremely important, making sure that people have the right information, but knowing that they have the right information at that point allows the aggregated information to also be correct. So,
yeah, and when you look at that, you start with this process where you're doing things project by project, then you become systemized, then you go to the next level with mBrain, where you become much more productized. Within that, is that part of the key value that adds? Right data, right person, so they can make the right decision?
Yeah, also what we're approaching, what we're doing with mBrain is adding a lot of the standardized quality tools and digitizing them. So we have continuous improvement tools inside, we have risk analysis, we have control plans, we have those things that allows the customer to actually also collect the right information and use it in the correct way. And I think for us, as I mentioned before, we've developed a system that we always wanted, working on the factory floor, working with machine acquisitions, working with optimizations and improvements, and allowing the customers to use it themselves. So that's the complete approach of mBrain, to allow the customer to further create value using data. And looking through the improvements that are quite simple to make, like a data model for a screen printer or for an SMT line. If you just look at the SMT machine, you might get one result. But if you look at the entire methodology to run the line, if you have a standstill and the viscosity change, you will have variation in volume in the solder paste, and of course, if you have a variation of volume in the solder paste, you might have unsoldered parts. And so these are cross-process. You can't just look at one process. You have to look upon the methodology of having a fast changeover, not just to improve the changeover time, but it actually allows the flexibility of the entire line, and you will be able to shorten the lead time, which means that by the end of the day, you can have a better customer delivery. So it is all connected. Everything has to be connected. So
yeah, and then Brain allows you to do that, and actually a systemized approach allows you to do that. And what you mentioned there is, again, going back to the customer. And Johannes, I just wanted to loop back on that. When you look at that 2-year journey of improving the performance of the factories, improving the performance of the business, how has that looked to the customers, and how do you think, and you've grown in that time, so one assumes that you've picked up some new customers and you've not lost your existing customers, but what's the dividend been for the customers during that period, and how has customer sentiment changed?
I think what the customer has earned and what they will continue to benefit from is that when we do this, we put our output as number one. So we always try to focus on improving quality, improving delivery performance, improving flexibility, and that will help our customers to get their products in time. And even if they have swings in their demand, which basically everyone has, we will do whatever we can to facilitate also those swings. They can be enormous. We have customers that can go up 50% with only 2-3 weeks time frame, and we have so far been fairly good at meeting those requirements. We were just announcing one win just before the summer. We have not been allowed to speak about their name, but they want us to be, it's going to be the biggest customer we have within, say, when we start October, they will be the biggest customer that we have in monthly sales. And they were quite small before, so we are adding 100 million Swedish plus in annual rate. And the only reason why they choose us as that, or not the only, but their main reason was that we could facilitate this extremely fast build-up. We could facilitate investing in a new line that was necessary, investing in necessary test equipment, and investing in resources to run this MPI, and we could do it in only 2 months' time before we go from nothing to full speed. And I think that's what I'm looking for, to be able to provide that to our customers, the extremely high service level that we try to offer. And I was personally involved in many of the discussions with the customer to allow this to happen. And before we went into the final meeting, we already had a board approval for all the investments necessary, so we could easily agree when we were having the final discussion that yes, we will do this, and we will do it right now, and we'll start tomorrow. So it was those kind of values is what we try to provide to our customers, combined with that we are allowing ourselves to carry the right amount of inventory. And just as an example of that, during the second quarter, when we had not only the constraints in how to work within our sites, but also quite difficult sourcing activities to get all the components, we managed our factories with an average of over 95% in delivery performance. We were going down 0.5 or 0.7% from Q1, which is basically nothing. And in July, we had our strongest month, I think, in 2 years in delivery performance. So we have been able to walk through these difficult times with keeping our KPIs at the level that we are quite proud of. Then, of course, there is always 1 or 2 customers that might feel that they have been mistreated, but then it comes always down to that the country that you have a certain component from has closed down, and the factories were then those are very tricky to overcome. But we have worked a lot with also those to try to compensate and ensure that we are getting production fairly quick up.
Yeah, I'm really interested, Johannes, when we look at that ability to win a new piece of business and to be able to confidently say that you can ramp at this volume and you can deliver. Mattias, when you look at that as part of a process and data management within a business, the ability to model those what if scenarios is really, really important, isn't it?
It is, of course, because you, as Johannes points out, the space and the free space in the factory is a result of a lot of good work done before, of course, and allows you to bring customers, and making sure that looking through the delivery performance of a line, for instance, knowing that when you onboard a customer, when you onboard a new product, what is the expected yield levels, what predictions do you need to make on the performance, that is crucial for delivery. And at the same time, as Johannes says, working very closely with the customer and the customer teams to make sure that you make a successful ramp up, and knowing what you promise is what you deliver. That's an extremely important part. And I think kudos to Johannes and the team there. That's what they promise, they will deliver. So it's cool.
Yeah, and I think that agility and that ability to adapt and the ability to deliver what the customer is really important. The other word that we're constantly hearing at the moment, as well as agility, is resilience. Johannes, do you think having this more data-driven approach makes you more resilient as a business because you can see what's happening, or what's your view on that?
I think that's an important factor as well. So it's not. I would not say it's not one or the other. It's a complete plate of different activities that we do. But yeah, it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're driving agility. You're driving resilience. We've got a couple of questions come in from the audience. I'm going to take those first of all. One particular question is asking, how do you, first of all, congratulations to you and your team and the successes and the best in class performance. But the first question, the direct question, is can you go a little bit further into how you promote that friendly site to site cooperation, and how you share best practices across multiple sites?
I think this is tricky. We have tried different models. We have tried to have like metrics documents saying that your correspondent person in every site is this. But we have seen that this doesn't add so much value. So what we have said is that where we see that the site is deviating from what we believe is a strong performance, we try to connect them with sites that has strong performance, and we try to learn from those sites. And we have in our operations team that is quite small, we have two very, very strong persons that are working together with me and enabling these discussions and enabling the connections and can help them to drive information and connecting people with the right opposite people from other sites. And we also try to add and help them to getting good external resources when needed. That's also something that we have to be aware of, that you cannot hire every single competence in the world. So hire the right one, hire the people that you think that you will fully utilize, and then you use external consultants like Mattias and MTEK when you see the need for it. That's how we have approached it. So we don't have a very systematic approach in how we handle every so to say site learning. We do it more case by case, and we know which sites that are strong in which processes through our KPI sheets, and then we can easily connect ones that we see that they need to learn from. But it's also to understand, if you have a big site and you have a small site, then maybe the mix is not perfect. So then you have to connect the smaller sites with each other in a way, so they learn from each other, and where they are in their own production. Yeah. Because if we do high volume production in China, it makes no sense to have them tell Stonehouse, which is our smaller site, to how to operate different processes, because they will never be able to do it in the same ways.
Yeah. So Mattias, those KPIs have got to be designed almost site by site, and you've got to make sure that you're actually, it's almost like be careful what you wish for. You don't want the same things from the Stonehouse site as Johannes says that you want from the China site. You've got to get the right KPIs, but the right way of measuring globally.
Yeah, it's to the point, and to emphasize what Johannes is mentioning, is that every site is unique by definition. Yeah, different people, they're different, be the same logo on the front of the factory, but still they operate slightly differently. But also to understand what the best knowledge sharing, best case, and showcasing the improvements that have been done, and explaining how they have been done. Every site has to formulate their own, I would say, recipe for success, and making sure that data models or decisions are taken are slightly adjusted for their actual needs. So you have to see the different sites, but you also have to understand the underlying data model. Changeover methodology is a changeover methodology. It is possible to reach numbers down to 100 seconds or less on a changeover in SMT line. It is possible to have a completely demand-driven flow with full traceability, and to making sure that you know exactly in which stage the products are. And that is of extreme importance. But maybe one site has different demands than the others on a higher level, but when it drills down, it comes down to making sure that the decisions are taken accordingly in the right order, based on the right information.
Yeah, and that's again absolutely data driven, and it's a continuous improvement process. It requires a lot of energy and intensity. You've got to maintain that. You've got to stop people getting bored with that. How do you make sure you have processes, systems that ensure that you can continue to improve? And how far are you in that journey?
I would say that we have more just started rather than being completed. I think there is not be an end game in this. We will continue to work with how we do things to become better and smarter always, as I see it. And there's a lot of interesting tools out there today. And when you're an EMS company, you tend to focus on your SMT line. Everyone has quite good SMT lines. But then you have all the logistics around it, all the material management and goods receipt, and how you ensure that you put the right component in store, and how do you restore them correctly, and how do you systemize all that. And we are into that journey at the moment, and where we are looking into how do we manage our warehouses and inventory control. That combined with the secondary operations that are also so important when it comes to coating and stuff like that. So that is a little bit often less standardized. So all the customers has different expectations and needs on that. So we try to also look into how can we make this more standardized, getting more and more tasks automated and instead of doing them manually, and that will make a more consistent output. And so it's so many areas, but we're in the earlier phase rather than harvesting what we have done, as I see it.
Yeah. So you see a lot of potential to become more efficient, but potential to grow the top line without growing the costs of the business in terms of site size, in terms of number of lines, in terms of headcount.
Definitely. I made some calculation before we went in here. If we take the 2018 sales and we add on the Speedboard acquisition we were turning just over 700 million, and this year we were doing 970, give or take, and we are roughly 6% more people than we were at that time.
Wow. Yeah. So how much further can you go?
If we can add, for every 10% we grow, if we can add 2 to 3% in headcount, I would be very happy. And I think that's still doable. It depends a little bit about the mix of the production you get, but say that 2 to 5% on every 10% you grow. That's what I see as a healthy relation. Anything below 5% should be handled without any headcount increase. That's my view of it.
Yeah. And Mattias, can this just go on and on, or is there a point where you say, no, you've improved everything that can be improved, or do you add new technologies, new techniques? How do you make that journey continuous, and how does Johannes to continue to perform as incredibly well as he has in the last couple of years?
No, I think I would say a day without improvement is a day when you wake up, you stretch your arms and you touch wood with both your arms. There was always going to be continuous improvements. You can always do things better. I think from the terms of the technology evolves, software systems and solutions evolve. So, and for us, it's all about digitalization, making sure people have the right information at the right point in time, that being the top CEO or that being the operator that assembles the boards, and making sure that you can do that, and also being able to collect information from operators and engineers and technicians on continuous improvements, because everyone can contribute on this. And that's, I think there is, the COVID situation has forced us to become more efficient. We see this with all the digital tools that we have now. And so mentally we are moving, and also the industry now is moving extremely quickly into a fully digitized and automated world. Yeah. We are on the beginning of a long journey. Smart factory is here to a certain extent, but it will be smarter, it will be faster, it will be better, cheaper, and it will be make sure that people are involved in making it happen.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely key. It's that better, cheaper, faster that everybody wants in consumer products. So, we want to see that continuous incremental improvement. We've only got 3 or 4 minutes to go, and I just wanted to circle back on the COVID-19 situation. 2 questions related to that. First one is really simple, Johannes. Your performance this year has been fantastic. Without it, would it have been even better, or has it just washed over you and it's had no impact?
I think that would have been convenient to say yes, it has all just washed over, but that's not true. We have had our fair share of issues. We had to close the factory in China. We had to start it up with quite low number. We have had to close one site in UK, and we have run that with lower capacity from end of March, and we still do that. So I would say that without the COVID-19, we would have added another 5 to 8% on top line, and we would not have been performing worse than we're doing on the profit side. So we have had our fair share of problems. But as I've said in earlier presentation that I made, it's much more convenient to enter a more turbulent surrounding if you have a 20% underlying growth. So I've been able to survive this in a good way, and we have been very successful in attracting new customers in the process when everyone has been struggling. So it's we have had our issues, but we have still managed to come out so far, at least, in a very, very good way. So we are very happy with where we are, but it has been a lot of hard work to be where we are.
Yeah, and having that underlying growth is really important. One of the other trends that we've seen with respect to COVID-19 is concerns over supply chains being too dependent on particular geographies, and maybe Asia's been part of that. Have you seen that from customers? And does your digital transformation, the processes you put in, make it easier for you to move stuff from site to site, or maybe stand stuff up in multiple sites?
I have 2 answers on that. Yes, we have seen that the customers are getting more and more sensitive to where you produce, to try to have more, how should I say, more closer supply chains. So that was a trend already, because it was, as I say, driven a bit by the trade, the tariffs and the trade wars that has been going on for some years. So we were already in that transition phase. But to move products from one side to another, it's theoretically very easy, and I call it theoretically easy because we have the software and all the programming. You can only download it in different sites, but it's all the details that are around every production that you do that you have to pay attention to. So moving production is never easy, because there is always some differences in between the sites, even if they use the same equipment, the same machines and all that. But it's easier, but it's not easy. That would be my answer.
Yeah, and Mattias, when you look at that from a point of view of kind of general factory efficiency and those improvements, is that part of what is going to make moving stuff to higher cost environments a little bit more palatable, because people might want to move stuff, but my sense is that brands and consumers don't particularly want to pay more.
No, and I think we're in a stage, as Johannes pointed out earlier, is that the labor costs are increasing, even in so-called low-cost labor regions, and transferring products, for instance, understanding not just the CAD files, not just the bill of materials, and they have physical stencils on the material, but actually understanding what are the variation that we also transfer, because the variations in the standard operating procedures, making sure that you can qualify a control plan in a different part of the world just by drag and drop. We are there now. But that is one of the biggest challenges, to make what is referred to as a push button transfer, to make sure that you can actually transfer product and productions with all the process parameters properly. So there's going to be a big evolution in that in the near future as well.
Yeah, and I think that's part of that process of factories getting smarter and smarter, and the idea of digital twins and all these, all these exciting things that digital transformation can offer us as we go forward. What I wanted to do now was just ask both of you to give me a quick summary of, what, if you were thinking in terms of the audience, what would you like them to take away from today's presentation? Maybe I can start with you, Johannes. What do you think are the key takeaways?
I think that for me the most important is to focus on what do the customer really want, and how do you build a production that supports that. It's easy to say if you're in sales and if you're in management, yeah, we can do everything of that, but how do you ensure that you have a production setup that really enables you to deliver what you promise? I would not say that we will always succeed, because we also fail in some occasions. That's natural, because sometimes the requirements are really, really tough. But we try to set everything we do up to meet what we have promised. That's my takeaway, and I think that creates the positive spread of word around. Note that we are a trustworthy company, and then we get a lot of questions from customers, and a lot of quotes from customers that wants to start to work with us. And I think that's my key takeaway. And how do we use the technologies and the data that's available to create that learning process internally to ensure that we get there?
Yeah, I think creating that very high level promise at the beginning, and then putting everything in place to deliver on that promise is huge. And in the EMS industry, having a reputation that you deliver on what you say you're going to deliver is a big deal. What about you, Mattias? What are your key takeaways for today?
Yeah, my key takeaway is that it's impossible to make amazing results when you're fact-based. You distribute your leadership and improvement work, and you're making sure that people are engaged and people are looking at the same type of data, making sure that you do best knowledge and best practice sharing. Basically, to what we're saying, making manufacturing simple. Not to the extent of making sure it's simple for everyone to understand where their role of value contribution is. And I think it is amazing how the journey that the Note team has done. Results speaks for themselves, basically.
Yeah, it's very impressive. For me, the takeaways, one of them would be to just hire Johannes, but not everybody can do that. So we need to take a systemized approach. And I think when I look at a systemized approach, one of the keys to it is that idea of right data with the right person, so they can make the right decision. But also, as Johannes very eloquently pointed out, it's enabling those people, having those people confident and comfortable to make those decisions, and to have the backup of management and the data behind them, so you can measure the right KPIs. But yeah, again, Johannes, congratulations on that growth. I'm looking forward to see what the results are for the next half of this year. We're all fascinated to see how the marketplace plays out. We all know that's unpredictable, but I'm confident that if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to fare better than many. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being with us today. Thank you so much for the audience for taking part today. This event will be available on demand shortly afterwards once we've edited the video, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.